But I think really successful people are never not scared or fearful, but they know it and they hold it, but they still push things forward.
Hmm. So when you're approaching, let's say, a new speaking engagement or something like that, and you mentioned the deconstruction of fear, do you like actually write down your fears, or what is that process like for you now?
Um, Again, I think several years of working with disruptive teenagers uh, meant that, like, because of this public speaking, I mean, you do a TEDx talk, people are happy to be there. If you go to Dubai to speak in a conference, people have, paid a lot of money to put you on a first class flight to get there.
Hmm.
So, so, I mean, like, I guess in a year, like, I would analyze, and, like, not every talk's perfect, and sometimes you don't quite read the audience right, or, like, so it's not that every time works perfectly, and there's always things you can tweak. But I think if you're open to assessing what you did, and being able to hear feedback, then you can stay ahead of the game, and ideally be hitting 80 to 95% most of the time.
Hmm.
So uh, I don't really have fears about that, but I think anybody who's taught kids, or here's the thing, right? Even if you want to be it's like, work out where you want to go, and if you know that you want to be speaking at TEDx and conferences, dial it back and just speak to a very small group first. Because if you can't even get on stage to speak to 4 people, then that's too big a jump. So I guess it's have
Yeah.
measured goals. And I definitely, a couple of years before I did the TEDx, I
Hmm.
worked out. I guess I worked. So when I first, when this phase began, I wanted to get invites to events to
Hmm.
cover it as the media. Then after about a year of that, I was like, I think I need to be talking now rather than listening, because I'm not hearing from every speaker things that I don't know already and that I could add to. So
Hmm.
then I knew that in another 6 to 12 months, I wanted to do a TEDx, and I wanted to be the speaker, and then I wanted to be a keynote speaker. So I think it's that thing about having goals, working out how to get to your goals, and then being slightly dissatisfied when you get to them to work out what you do next.
Hmm.
So and again, also, I played sport to a high level for a long time, and so we had a golden period where for 2 years we won 11 finals out of 11. But you know that in 20-year career, it's never going to be like that. You're either on the way up, or you're on the up and everyone wants to beat you, or you're on the way down. And I think having that degree of yin and yang about things means that you can hold everything in context. And then equally, you come home and the kids don't care how well the talk went. They want you to help with their maths homework, which is not always easy. So,
Hmm.
you know, I think that helps, and that helps to dial the fear down, to put it back into a proportion that's appropriate.
Yeah, it definitely does. What sport were you professionally playing?
So it was ultimate frisbee, and we were dreaming that it would be in the Olympics, and it was discussed that it might be. So I played in the US and Costa Rica and Mexico, and then I helped create the Irish national team, which obviously made it a bit easier to be the first captain. But it was a fun
Mhm.
ride, and the great thing about that was we had a lot of interaction with some of the best teams from California, who
Mhm.
even came to Ireland. And again, therefore, you might be the best in Ireland, and then you bring over the Californians who've won US nationals. So everything's relative, and if you can be open to playing with people who are so much better than you, then I think it's a growth mindset, really, isn't it? And
Mhm.
that's why I mentioned sport, because I think it can bring it back into business. And some of the people I work with who do podcasts for us, the Innovation Show, this guy Aidan McCullen, he used to play for Leinster, which is the top Irish province on occasion, and therefore he had 12 years as a professional athlete. And I think those people are hungry to learn when they move into new areas, and again, that's a very healthy way to do things. And then again, ultimate frisbee too is quite interesting because it's self-refereeing, so therefore you've got a kind of
Hmm.
honor code about it. So if you were to be playing solely to win but without the spirit of the game, as it's called, then you're actually kind of in breach of the whole reason of playing.
Hmm.
So I think that can be quite helpful too, that do the best you can, but without doing it in an unethical way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fantastic philosophy about life as well, because there are so many other areas where that translates that to. What
Yeah,
initial?
hopefully.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, after you.
Oh, I was gonna. No, no, no. Please continue your thought. I'll lead us into another area in a second.
No, I'm done.
Okay, I want to hear about what initially got you into the blockchain space, and then kind of how you're looking at it now.
Yeah, so with blockchain, I mean, so So Satoshi Nakamoto and all of that, I'd heard of for a few years prior to maybe 2015, 2016, because we had a friend who'd moved to the Caribbean and renamed his Facebook account Satoshi Nakamoto. So initially I was like, what is, so I knew about it in that way from a slightly random way. And then he actually became Ruben Godfrey. He became quite active in advising ICOs subsequently. So I guess he was ahead of the game there.
Mm-hmm.
But to park that for a second, we were starting to do a lot of stories about blockchain as proof of concept of what it could do, how it could be useful, how it could complement with the Internet of Things and big data. So we were running stories for several years, long before we did anything in relation to crypto and that side of things. So it definitely was in the space and interested, but not in a prematurely prophetic way. Like, we didn't buy Bitcoin when it was at the time, when it was like, $1 or $7 or $15.
Mm-hmm.
So we were much more looking at what can blockchain do rather than Bitcoin. And I think that's been good, and that's been the right way to play it, because obviously by writing about it, people began to ask me if I would be an advisor. And at first I was like, I don't really see how that would work, because I wouldn't want to just shill one company, because we have to analyze and write. And how do I know that your product's better than any others? You're approaching me cold.
Mm-hmm.
So I said no to quite a few. And then I thought, well, if I was to say yes, how would I help, and in what way would I help? And therefore the advisory began as we spoke about messaging and communication and articulating what the problem was they were solving. So it was gradual prior to autumn of 2017, and then autumn 2017 into 2018, it began to really kick off. And Ruben, who no longer was calling himself Satoshi Nakamoto, which was always ironic, like he never claimed to be one of the actual 3 or 4 guys who was the pseudonym, but he said, look, you're listed on ICO Bench, I think it was, you're in the top 10 for advisors. But it turned out the reason he was doing that was because he was a place above me, so he wanted to go and look at the website to see him. So it was a funny way in, and like with all things, with the page 1 of Google search, once we were both in the top 10, many other people asked us to work with them,
Mm-hmm.
because we were already the ones they were finding. And from that, you gradually went up, and then when you were in the 3, 2, and 1, then everybody wants to work with you, and then you create structures to do that. And it became super interesting, because it very much was like the internet 1.0 startup boom of the late 90s. Many people were trying stuff. Not all of it probably should have been using blockchain, and that was the big filtering. Were people jumping on the bandwagon, or was this an idea that benefited from using blockchain technology? And obviously things got very bubbly and came down the other side of that. But at the same time, I maintain good links and observe the ones that did build what they wanted to build and are going through all the normal startup periods of growth about commercialization and spinning it out and building the product. And so in some ways, give it another maybe half year or two, the ones that have smart blockchain based solutions are delivering it, because it's a better solution than what came before. Now, that's not to say that the technology itself is not evolving, and there may be better solutions again down the road, but you're always having to fix what you can with the best technology you have to hand at the time. So it's not to say that what they've built is definitive, but it may be the best solution at the moment. And I guess for me, the same insights and the same relevance in terms of startups that work are still applicable. And again, like Steve Blank, I imagine, like the book I'm reviewing, it's 17 years since he first published it, but there's still a lot of value in what he says, because some things change, but some things stay the same.
Yeah. So of the projects that you advise in the past, are there any that you are still excited about, or have they kind of come and gone?
So no, so for, I guess, so Morpheus Network, we're looking to do seamless transactions when you approach borders. So the idea was to streamline cross-border movement of goods. Now, so on one hand, the situation we're in right now is really pushing things back, but on the other hand, we still have globalization and movement of products across the world. So that hasn't stopped. So therefore, this solution still speeds up time relative to what it would be if you weren't using the solution. So they're still going well. And then I was talking to another one that's, that 2 years later is still building the product. And this is the thing, like, I mean, while you may raise X amount of money in a very short period of time, and again, I worked for Ericsson for a while,
Yeah.
who are obviously big multinational software development, amongst other things. It's very hard to build and ship things very quickly. And so many of them are still doing it. And I guess the smart ones were the ones that with the money they raised, they didn't leave it all in Bitcoin or Ether. And they put it into a range of currencies, including, their own local fiat currency.
Mhm.
And then that way you weren't killed when Ether, Ether now is about $180, $200,
Yeah.
whereas, it was much higher before. So, there's always a little bit of roller coaster about when did you move your assets into something more than just crypto. On the other hand, though, like if you'd kept it in Bitcoin, you wouldn't be as crippled as some,
Mhm.
And I guess what was happening was people were throwing too much out there and looking for things that weren't really realistic, and that damaged the confidence of many of the tokens and what they could have been worth. So no, there's quite a few, but they're just going through the normal time frame of a startup. And while you could raise money in a day or a week or 3-week campaign, it still might take you a year or two to build the complete and market killer thing that you're trying to build.
Mm-hmm. Right. So with that and the ups and downs of the kind of the market itself, are you like watching Bitcoin and Ether and the other currencies closely, or is that not so much of what you focus on?
It's a good question. And so we know that back in August onwards 2017, Bitcoin was going up 1,000 a month and more,
Mm-hmm.
hit 20,000 by the winter and fell after that. And then it fell, maybe the lowest it fell was 3,000. But in some ways last year, and even again now, in some ways Bitcoin's actually become more stable than some other things. I mean, if you think about the oil went to a negative price,
Mm-hmm.
while Bitcoin had its fall, the value of Bitcoin now is still higher than it ever was before it went on the run of 2017. At the same time, it's not something that I watch or I need to watch daily, because it's not really doing that much that rapidly. And I think too that there are buy orders that if it falls below a certain price, it will get scooped up. And then I get these crazy emails saying, my client would like to buy 10,000 Bitcoin. Can you help us? It's like, no, and yet also the other problem with this one is that you still have a few people that hold very large numbers of Bitcoin, and therefore market manipulation, I guess it's like Winston Churchill's comment about democracy being pretty terrible, but better than any other option.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, Bitcoin and the whole concept behind it does do a lot of things better. I mean, obviously, like we could be in a period of massive quantitative easing now. Now that the EU are printing money, now that the US is printing money, to bail things out. That's kind of okay on one hand, but on the other hand, that is a deflationary thing to do. So therefore, with the Bitcoin halving, we may yet see the proof of concept for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin isn't suddenly going to be metaphorically printed out to bail people out. So these governments' actions may shore up the fundamental value of Bitcoin. But I throw a final asterisk into this, though, is that Ether is very interesting, and in some ways it was a great idea and it does a lot of things well. But you have a couple of problems, or one is the vagaries of the founder, Vitalik Buterin, will almost be briefing against it sometimes. And sometimes that's not, I think, conscious. It's more he's a developer and he's maybe too heavily into the geek side of things and to look at the flaws, that he doesn't always consider the impact on something that's now a tradable currency.
Mm-hmm.
And then very recently, I think in the last day or so, Ether took a big jump from in the 200s down to 180. So I'm trying to work out what that is, and sometimes it happens for logical reasons, sometimes it happens for slightly whimsical reasons. So these things are interesting. They may have, I mean, obviously if you say they may work better than dollars, euros, and say Zimbabwean dollars or Argentinian pesos, because the trouble in some countries, or Venezuela, is if you have hyperinflation on your money, what you take out and what you get paid in one day, it might be worth nothing the next day. And in a situation like that, the cryptocurrencies offer a better store of value, because Bitcoin isn't going to plunge like that. Hasn't done that anytime recently, and certainly offers better value than your local currency. So therefore, I think we're in an interesting time that it does things better than what was done before, but it's not necessarily going to be the gold standard. Now, you could see that say with Facebook want Libra, and they want to be the one that gives you the stable coin.
Hmm.
But I think it will be somebody, when someone comes along who's not as toxic as Facebook,